Alright guys, Murph's here, and today I want to go over a little thought exercise with you guys. Now, for those of you who might be new to the channel, a thought exercise is when I pick a situation or scenario and I game plan what weapon systems I would utilize in that scenario. I've been doing this kind of thing ever since I was a kid, and I use it as a research tool to kind of get me to look outside of my own preconceived notions and expectations and embrace other points of view or systems and evaluate them for how successful they would be in a specific situation. So in order to ensure that I do that, I generally put some sort of limiting factor on me, be it age range, that time frame, I guess I should say, or manufacturer, ammunition, something. I utilize something to kind of break me out of my own thinking traps and all that kind of thing and really make me expand my knowledge. So it's something that I brought to the channel, and there's like 3 of you who actually like sometimes even request these videos, so I keep putting them out as long as there's an interest. Now, for today's video, we're going to be discussing what I would carry on an Argentinian duck hunt. Now, that might seem really specific. However, Argentina is considered to be a mecca of duck hunting. The duck season goes from May all the way into August, and Argentina has 13 species of duck that are entirely indigenous to Argentina. So, with bag limits ranging from 20 to 60 ducks a day, you can understand why hunters have a tendency to flock, if you'll forget the pun, to Argentina. Now that we know where it is that we're going, what is my limiting factor? What I decided to make my limiting factor would be that I could only use a semi-automatic shotgun. Now, that may not seem like that big of a deal to most people. However, longtime viewers of the channel will know that I am not the biggest fan of semi-automatic shotguns. Whenever I reach for a shotgun, I'm reaching for a system that I know is going to be steadfast, simply reliable. And for me, that generally means pump action shotguns because there's less opportunity for things to go wrong. Doesn't mean things won't go wrong because you can still have malfunctions in pump action shotguns, but it's less likely to be an issue in a pump action shotgun than it is in a semi-auto in my experience. However, it's been quite a few years since I've stayed on top of semi-automatic hunting shotguns, so I decided that this would be a great opportunity to review what is out on the market these days in order to kind of challenge my preconceived notion on the reliability of semi-automatic shotguns. Now, with that being the case, what else am I looking for? Because I'm going to Argentina, there's probably some other limiting factors as far as a foreign country's firearms laws and all that kind of stuff. Well, whenever you go down to Argentina, it's not just a matter of getting off the plane, walking into the woods, and shooting at ducks. There's a whole registration process that has to be done in order to be able to have an Argentinian hunting license. You're going to want to go through an outfitter of some sort who's going to help you with the process, making sure that your passport's good. And in addition to your hunting license, also make sure the importation of your firearms are okay, are going to go smoothly and all that kind of stuff if you should choose to do that. Of course, a lot of these outfitters also provide their own shotguns, but that wouldn't work out very well for my scenario now, would it? So when it comes to limitations, for the most part, based on Argentinian firearms laws, hunting shotguns are not as closely regulated as long as the barrel is in excess of 24 inches. So not too big of a deal here. The only limitation they put on importation is that you not bring more than either 3 guns or 1 gun with 3 barrels, which it's not unusual to see other countries be more focused on the barrel than the United States is, as far as like being a serialized part of the firearm and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes a barrel is literally the thing that constitutes a firearm in a foreign country, because you can't really have a gun without a barrel. Kind of an interesting way of looking at it, as opposed to randomly branding chunks of metal as being firearms receivers. But I digress. Anyway, before we get too political. So with that being the case, it's not too big of a limitation. What about limitations that I'm setting? What are things that I want to see out of a waterfowl shotgun? Well, I prefer 26-inch barrels. I think it's a really great trade-off between being able to swing through a target and not be excessively long or overweight. In addition to that, weight is not too big of a consideration because I'm primarily going to be shooting out of a duck blind, not necessarily walking over hill and dale. Price is not necessarily something I'm looking at, though it is helpful in determining things. Think of it as more of a tiebreaker should one arise as opposed to the goal. And then cartridge length. Now, of course, I'm going with the 12 gauge because I prefer to hunt waterfowl with 12 gauge. And I do not care for the 3.5-inch chambering. So I would prefer something that comes in a 3-inch chamber. All right, so now that we've kind of got my specifications, my parameters that I'm wanting to look through, what's available on the market? And the short answer is a lot. A lot of shotguns. So I had to figure out some kind of way to pare down, and what I pretty much did was I picked 3 shotguns at random and decided to run them against each other. So what I selected was the Browning Maxus 2, the Retay Gordion waterfowler, and the Fabarms XLR-5. All right, so let's start putting these shotguns up against each other and seeing how it is that I feel about each one. The Browning Maxus 2. Now, each one of these guns, by the way, guys, claims to be the fastest semi-automatic shotgun on the market. So that's not necessarily going to play a factor here because it seems that is a frequently touted data point for a lot of different manufacturers. Ultimately, any one of these shotguns is faster than I can operate a pump-action shotgun. So that's where we're setting our expectations on that particular data point. Now, the Browning Maxus 2 is interesting because it claims to be able to run the full gambit of shotgun shells without any malfunctions, which is impressive all on its own, because that's one of the issues with shotguns is they have, with semi-automatic shotguns, I should say, is that they have a tendency to be ammunition finicky. It's just something that you have to account for with these different systems. Especially when you're talking about a 3.5-inch chambered gun, you're talking about something that is running a wide variety of not just pressures and velocities and all that kind of stuff, but also cartridge length. So it's not outside the realm of possibility to expect that a 3.5-inch gun might choke, especially in a semi-automatic system, might choke on 2 3/4-inch shells. However, the Browning Maxus 2 in its 3.5-inch chamber claims to be able to reliably feed target load 2 3/4-inch shells just as well as it can feed 3.5-inch shells. Now, some of the videos that I saw out there on this particular subject kind of disproved it. However, that was primarily shooting from like over top of your head or something along those lines, where the shotgun would not properly cycle with 2 3/4-inch hunting loads. That's not a shock, honestly. Especially when you're holding the gun up over your head, your body is not providing any resistance in order to be able to help the system operate appropriately. So that's kind of a tall order, if I'm being completely honest. Now, they do make the Browning Maxus 2 in just a 3-inch chamber, as well as with a 26-inch barrel. And its method of operating is very similar to that of the Remington model 1100 and 1187, of which I have quite a bit of experience, but I removed from the list because I have experience with them. So it uses a very similar button type system across the bottom of the loading port, which is kind of like what the Remington model 1100. It's a little different, and actually the trigger guard is set up in such a manner to help you slide the shells in to hit that button in order to be able to function the system. But I do appreciate that it's very similar, especially since that gives you a reliable last shot hold open, and it's a manual of arms I'm already fairly familiar with and I think is well designed. A lot of shotguns out there like the Benellis and stuff like that, you have a button you have to press in order to lock the bolt to the rear and also go through the process of releasing your shell. This makes it so that you utilize the shell in doing that instead of having a completely different motion in order to be able to get the system to work. Okay, well, the Browning Maxus 2 is looking very interesting. Now, another thing that all 3 of these shotguns have in common is that they have oversized trigger guards, which, of course, is important for waterfowlers who are potentially shooting in frigid conditions and are going to want to have gloves on. All right, now, what about the Retay Gordion, which I hope I'm saying that correctly. This was a very interesting shotgun. However, its manual of arms is more similar to that of a Benelli than it is of the Remington model 1100. So already it's coming out on the short end of the stick. This is also a 3.5-inch chamber, which maybe if I did a little bit more shopping around, I would find a 3-inch chamber, but I'm kind of holding the 3.5-inch chamber against the shotgun right off the bat. Now, this is also the budget end in a Turkish manufactured shotgun, of which I do have to admit to having a predisposition to disliking. However, a lot of the reviews on it were very positive, and that's very difficult to discount about this particular shotgun, especially when you consider that it's coming in for consistently under $1,000. That's pretty good. That's really hard to look over. So I don't love it, but I don't hate it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the third option, that being the Fabarms XLR-5. Now, this shotgun, having very similar, camo patterns and all that type of stuff to the other two, does have one glaring issue with it, in my opinion, and that is that from the manufacturer, they do have a, I guess, requirement for a minimum load in which, an actual velocity and shot load are specified as being the absolute minimum that they will guarantee the gun will operate reliably with. And that is something I do not appreciate. Now, first off, just from a general reliability standpoint, I don't appreciate that. It's one of my issues with semi-autos being ammunition finicky, and here we are highlighting that from the manufacturer. Don't care for that right off the bat. However, I understand it, and it doesn't mean I have to like it, especially when you talk about practicing beforehand. If I'm going to drop a ton of money to go down to Argentina and shoot some ducks, I'm going to want to get in a good amount of practice to make sure that I'm getting the best bang for my buck, pun intended. So with that being the case, I'm going to spend a lot of time out on the trap range, and I could spend a lot of time out on the trap range shooting expensive high brass loads, or I could go ahead and get my early practice in with lower cost target ammunition and get good, clean, solid reps instead of having to run through a whole bunch of malfunctions. That becomes a pretty important dynamic right there. So in my opinion, that drops the Fabarms from consideration, because it is not nearly as blind in ammunition availability and ammunition options as the other two shotguns being brought up for consideration. So now it's down between the Browning Maxus 2 and the Retay Gordion. And I've got to be completely honest, guys, the manual of arms makes the Browning Maxus 2 win. Might be I'm sure that's a shocker to any of you who know me well and know how much I love the Remington model 1100 and 1187. But ultimately, I want to stick with something that's already very similar to a shotgun that I work around to begin with. Now, is that important of a consideration? Are the ducks coming to kill me? No. Being able to do rapid reloads and all that kind of stuff is only going to be important from the standpoint of being able to keep that shotgun engaged in the hunting activity, to make sure that I'm getting all the opportunities to harvest the bag limit of ducks every day so that I get the most for my effort. Fond memories of going through boxes of shells chasing these exotic birds, as opposed to cringe memories of having to sit there and clear malfunction after malfunction or struggle to keep my gun in the hunt while everyone else around me has their guns going off. I will go ahead and invest in the Browning Maxus 2 at that point. All right, guys. I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. I am curious to know what you guys would have picked from this lineup or other options that are out on the market. I know there are way more options than what it is that I actually limited myself to. There were just entirely too many to sift through in the time that I have available to myself right now. So, with that being the case, guys, I hope you found this interesting, and have a good day. All right, if you stuck around for a little bit, I want to go ahead and let you guys know that if you like this content, Murph's Law is now on Facebook with the Murph's Law official Facebook page. Link in the description. So if you want more access to content for the channel, as well as access to myself and other like-minded people, go ahead and hop on the Facebook page. We'd love to have you there. All right, and with that, that's pretty much what I got, guys. Have a good day.